سلام آیز اسکوادیا، خیلی خوش اومدید. من هایزنبرگم و قطعا توی ویدیوهای اخیر اونایی که جدید به ما اضافه شدید باید با صدای من آشنا باشید. حالا ممکنه تصویر منو ندیده باشید، اونایی که از قدیم دنبال میکنن که 100% تصویر منم دیدن. البته من انتهای ویدیوها همیشه یه بخشی از استریما رو گذاشتم که اونایی که تا ته ویدیو رو کامل میدیدن، ببخشید موبایل من روشنه، با قیافه منم آشنا بودن. مرسی که از این محتوای جدید انقدر حمایت کردید. خیلی بهتر از قبل شده. هنوز از نظر من میتونه خیلی پیشرفت کنه. سبک و سیاق کانال یوتیوب هم به همین سمت و سو قراره بره، چیزی که حالا حداقل تو یک ماه گذشته دیدین. در خصوص این ویدیو باید بگم که قراره یه سری از ویدیوهامون اختصاص داده بشه به مصاحبه هایی که من با یه سری از بازیسازهای خارجی انجام میدم. و خب من آلمان زندگی میکنم، طبیعتا زبان اولی که الان باش درگیرم بجز فارسی، حالا که کلا زبان مادریمه، زبان آلمانیه. زبان انگلیسی شکسته بسته ای هم دارم. مصاحبه هایی که تا پیش از اینم انجام میدادم به خاطر اینکه معمولا به صورت سوال و جواب بوده، یعنی من میتونستم به صورت متنی کاملا روی متن و ایراداتش تسلط داشته باشم و به صورت لایو نبوده. مصاحبه هم اینطوری نیست که مثلا یه ویدیو معمولی باشه بتونی کات بدین به طرف بگی بذار از اول اینو بپرسم، و به صورت لایو و در لحظه صحبت میکنیم. و خب طبیعتا من سوالات رو از روی یه متن مشخصی هم نمیخونم که بگیم حالا مثلا قبلا اینطوری بوده یا نه، بر اساس روند صحبتایی که داشتیم و یه پیش‌فرض ذهنی سوالات رو میگم. توی مصاحبه ها ممکنه ایرادات جزئی زبان انگلیسی ببینین. حالا مثلا به عنوان مثال میگم توی این ویدیو من لفظ کانسیدر و کانسایدر مثلا تلفظ کردم، یا به جای I want to گفتم I want. اینا مثال صرفا. تلاش بر این بوده که این فضای مصاحبه ایجاد بشه و از این طریق یه ارتباطی بین شما مخاطب‌ها و سازنده‌های بازی هم شکل بگیره. با استودیوهای کوچیک شروع کردم برای همچین برنامه‌هایی و طبعا سراغ استودیوهای بزرگ هم میریم. به مرور 100% با حمایت شما، با کامنت هاتون، با لایک هاتون و نظراتتون. امیدوارم از این مصاحبه هم لذت ببرید و اگر ایرادی توی حالا اکسنت زبان انگلیسی من یا تلفظ بعضی از کلمات دیدید، من پیشاپیش عذرخواهی میکنم. خواهش میکنم تا انتهای ویدیو رو کامل ببینید و امیدوارم دوست داشته باشید. عاشقتونم فعلا. Hello everyone, Jack Bennett is our guest today and we are going to talk about Tales of Iron. Can you introduce yourself more, explain more about your position in Oddbug Studio and also your job position in Tales of Iron?
Yeah, so I'm Jack Bennett. I'm one of the co-founders of Oddbug Studio. And from day to day, I'm like the producer and designer. So that basically means I keep the team on task and keep the game going forward, hopefully. And then from a design point of view, I do like the level design and the quest design. So lots of varied tasks.
Okay, thank you. I want, before I start talking about Tales of Iron, I want to know a little more about you, and I want know that what was your first memory of video games? I mean, your first game that you try, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think the earliest memory, or the thing that's most vivid in my memory, is obviously like the SNES, the Super Nintendo. That was the first game I was like, well, I can remember playing and it not just being me like bashing buttons. And I think on that, the first sort of games I remember, like Goof Troop, it was like an old Disney game. Multiplayer, so I used to play with my dad, and you're like kicking blocks around like a puzzle game, which is obviously I loved the co-op element of that. That was great. And then the other one, again a co-op game, was Sunset Riders, which I think is re-released on the Switch now. But yeah, that's like a cowboy game, side scroller, where you had like a 360 aiming. I just remember the vivid colors, and yeah, I loved that game. But I mean, not great games, but I enjoyed them at the time.
Okay, fine. And since when did you decide to become a game designer? Can you explain more about it?
So I went to university in Norwich, at Norwich University of the Arts, and studied games art and design there. So I was there from like 2010 to 2013, I think I graduated. So I was there quite a while. And that's where I met Dan and Martin, the other two founders of Oddbug Studio. And after university, we decided, you know, we're going to start our own studio and start working on games, because the easiest way to get a job is if you work for yourself. And luckily we started working on Dan's side project, his project from university called The Lost Bear, and we was able to get into contact with Sony, and that's how we got funding to start a studio and get going, which was really cool.
Okay. So after these questions, I think it's better we talk about Tales of Iron. You have already created a 2D VR game. I mean, the Last Beer, I think. Yes, the name was The Last Beer, I think. Yes. Was there a special reason that the art style and platforming of Tales of Iron is very similar to your previous game, or?
So, with all of our like games, we want to create like a library of the Oddbug Studio collection. So, like, if you see a Pixar movie or you see a Studio Ghibli movie, you know that's a Pixar movie, that's a Studio Ghibli movie. So we want it to be like when you see our games, you know it's an Oddbug Studio game. So we want to try and keep this consistent art style throughout our games, and that just obviously is something that we like to do because we want to create universes. We want to create universes that people fall in love with, people want to be playing in. So by keeping this consistent art style, people already have some understanding of what we're trying to do and what our games are going to be like. So yeah, that's why we like to keep that across the games and hopefully into the future too.
Okay, and this question is why I saw Doc Coggle in your game. I mean, when I heard the Doc Coggle voice, the first question that I want to talk about it is, were you inspired by Witcher 3 in making this game, or it's not important? The Doc Coggle is Doc Coggle, and it's not a connection between Doc Coggle and Witcher and Tales of Iron.
So obviously there's no connection like directly. I wish I could say like, oh yeah, it's a story from The Witcher, but it's not directly connected. But for us, The Witcher 3 was like a big inspiration. We really liked that gritty world, this Eastern European inspired gritty world, because art director Martin's from the Czech Republic, so obviously he's into like a lot of that sort of Slavic history, that sort of Grimm's fairy tale world almost. Like we want our stories to come across as almost like a fairy tale, but they've got this darker side to them, which obviously The Witcher does really well. So we kind of wanted to have that similar feeling to ours, and obviously Doug Cockle's voice perfectly represents that. You know, he's got this deep raspy voice that kind of gives you this like welcoming feeling, but at the same time there's like an eeriness or a darkness to it, that grittiness that we wanted. So his voice kind of matched that tone we wanted to create, which is perfect for us. And obviously having a narrator over the top gives you that sort of story, like you're having a story read to you, and that's what we wanted to create.
I have another question that you already answered. I want to ask about your collaboration with Mr. Doc Coggle, and I think first of all because you interested Witcher 3, maybe this choice is for this reason, but now you tell me that storytelling was important and Doc Coggle was best choice anyway.
Yeah, well the funny thing about it was like when we was designing the game, we wanted a narrator, but the publisher came to us, United Label, said like, who's your ideal sort of person to be? And us being like a 5-person indie team, we was like, oh yeah, we'd like to get Doug Cockle, you know, Geralt of Rivia, that'd be great, expecting him not to want to work on a small little indie game. So we left that with the publisher, and they went off and spoke to him, and he really liked it, and he was on board straight away. So for us, that was like a big career highlight, that, you know, Geralt of Rivia wanted to work on our little rat game, which is kind of nice to know.
Fine. And a funny question for me, was everything funny when I played this game, and everything was around rats and frogs. My question is, why rats and frogs? Did the design of these characters have a special source of inspiration or something else?
So the rats come from Dan, who's the lead designer and project lead. They're all based on his pet rats. So I don't, in the menu there's that like honor page with all of the rats. They were his pet rats, and Reggie, the main character in the game, was his first pet rat. So like Reggie, the chef, the smith, Doug, they were all his, and Dennis, they were all his real life pet rats. So obviously he wanted to put them into the game so that they're like remembered beyond their life. And obviously that means they've all got their own like little characters already from the real world. And obviously we knew we wanted a sort of classic fantasy world. We wanted that medieval fantasy, like elves and dwarves and goblins and humans. So we had like our rats being this sort of human-esque type character. We wanted that classic goblin to go with it. And so obviously the frogs in the swamps hidden away with their boils and tough skin kind of were like a natural image for the goblins. So that was something that kind of came naturally when we started looking down that path of like classical fantasy.
Okay, nice. That was amazing anyway. And the other question is that Tales of Iron has a bit of Souls-like atmosphere. Of course, if we don't consider the endurance line, I mean stamina line.
Yeah.
Were you also inspired by From Software games, or was Witcher your only source of inspiration?
No, definitely like the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, Sekiro in some ways, Salt and Sanctuary. These are all like the Souls-like games we like the combat, but for us it was like the difficulty should come from you understanding the enemy and learning what you're doing, rather than like the travel to the boss and getting there, which is a lot of the issue in most Souls-like. So we tried to focus more on boss design, but we, like you said, we removed the stamina or endurance bar from the game. And the main reason for that was that we found that when we was playing Souls-likes, a lot of the time you're not watching the enemy, you're not watching what's going on, you're like watching this little UI bar in the corner, like, have I got enough to do this dodge, or can I take this block? And that's not what we wanted. We wanted the player like focused on the incoming attack and watching their character and watching the boss to see how they should react. So it felt like you was more part of the experience. So by removing the stamina bar, it allowed us to focus players' attention, but then also that led us into this much more fluid combat, because players weren't worried that, can I do this dodge, can I do this block? They just were experimenting with what they could do. So that allowed us to get much more flowing combat, and it felt much more like a rat, because you were like scurrying around and dodging around, and it all kind of flowed nicely into this liquid combat, which was quite nice.
Okay, so that was the reason that you have not any stamina line in your combat design. Okay. And let's talk about the future. I want to know, are you planning to create a new IP for the future, or you have any plans to make a sequel to Tales of Iron?
Okay, so I had to be careful about what I say here, because it's
I know that.
It's all under
NDA
wrap.
problem. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, exactly. So what I can say is that we are working on another project. I'm not going to say where, who, what, but we are working with United Label, the publisher, again. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to say what we're working on. But I will say that the last line of Tales of Iron that the narrator says is quite poignant. That's all I'll say.
That was not enough answer, but that was enough answer. I understand it.
Good.
Okay, that was fine. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. And is there anything that you would like to mention at the end of the interview about your game, or something that you think you want talk with my audience about your game?
No, I just wanted to say, like, I actually watched you streaming it as well, so I'm really
really you watch
it.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched you play, so I'm glad you played it. I'm glad you liked it. It's been fun talking to you about it. I'm just glad that people. It's still like really weird 6 months later, with the game being out that long, that people are still playing it and finding it for the first time. So it's really nice. It's really exciting. So yeah, just thank you for playing.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to you that you watch this interview. Anyway, have a good time and bye bye. یا خدا ماشاءالله آقا دوناروما ماشاءالله. آخ اگه این میرسید. بودو جون مادر دمباپه میاد و توی دروازه. باری کلا بودو روماریو ماشاءالله پشت دفاع رو بابا بکش دیگه، چقدر لیفتش داد. وای تک به تک رو ریدم.